What happens when one of the most beloved stars in entertainment sits down for what should be a routine interview, only to find himself facing the most hostile interrogation of his career? What unfolds when years of built-up resentment explode into an on-air confrontation so intense that it leaves the audience in stunned silence? Today we are diving deep into the shocking moment. Keanu Reeves walked onto the View set expecting to promote his latest film, but instead walked into an ambush that left viewers in the entertainment world buzzing for weeks. Hello everyone, welcome to Behind the Applause. Let us know in the comments which country you're watching from. Let's get started. The morning started like any other at the View Studios in New York. Keanu Reeves arrived in his signature understated style, a simple black jacket over a worn t-shirt and jeans that probably cost less than most people make in a day. His hair was a bit disheveled, in that effortlessly cool way that only he could pull off. The production assistants were buzzing around him, offering him coffee, adjusting his microphone, and making sure everything was perfect for what everyone assumed would be another easygoing interview about his upcoming film and charity work. Joy Behar sat at the iconic table, shuffling through her notes with that mischievous smile she gets when she knows she has something juicy planned. Whoopi Goldberg was reviewing her opening remarks, occasionally glancing over at Joy with a look that suggested she might have some idea about what was coming. Sarah Haynes was chatting pleasantly with the crew, her usual warm demeanor intact, while Sunny Hostin sat quietly, her legal background evident in the way she was methodically organizing her talking points. Alyssa Farah Griffin rounded out the panel, looking slightly nervous, as she always did when big celebrities were on the show. The show opened with its usual fanfare, the audience applauding as Whoopi introduced their guest. Keanu Reeves walked out with that humble, quiet smile, waving to the crowd, completely unaware that he was walking into what would become one of the most unexpected television moments in recent memory. He took his seat next to Whoopi, his posture relaxed as he settled in for what he thought would be 20 minutes of pleasant conversation about his work, his passions, maybe a few questions about his personal life. "Keanu, welcome back to The View," Whoopi said warmly, her voice carrying that familiar authoritative tone that has made her such a beloved figure in daytime television. "It has been too long since we have had you here. Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here with you ladies," Keanu replied, his voice calm and genuine. He had done this dance 1,000 times before, the carefully choreographed routine of celebrity interviews where everyone knows their role and nobody steps out of line. Sarah Haynes jumped in next, her voice bright and enthusiastic. "Your new film is absolutely incredible, Keanu. The action, the story, everything about it feels so authentic. Can you tell us about the inspiration behind it? If you've watched this far, you're already part of this journey. Subscribe and follow along." Keanu leaned forward slightly, his eyes lighting up as he began to discuss his creative process. "You know, Sarah, this film really came from a place of wanting to tell a story about finding purpose in a chaotic world. I've been in this industry for over 3 decades now, and I think people sometimes forget that behind all the roles and the lights, I'm still just a guy who loves to make movies and ride his motorcycles." The conversation flowed naturally for the first few minutes, with Sunny asking about his charitable foundation and Alyssa inquiring about his upcoming projects. Keanu seemed relaxed, comfortable, genuinely enjoying himself as he shared stories about working with different directors and stunt coordinators. The audience was engaged, laughing at his self-deprecating jokes and applauding when he mentioned his passion for reading and philosophy. But then Joy Behar cleared her throat and something in the atmosphere shifted. Keanu noticed it immediately, that subtle change in energy that every experienced performer learns to recognize. Joy had been unusually quiet during the opening segment, which was completely out of character for someone who typically dominated conversations. "Keanu," Joy began, her voice carrying a tone that was just slightly sharper than casual conversation, "I have to ask you about something that has been bothering me for quite some time now." Keanu tilted his head slightly, his smile unwavering but with a certain quiet contemplation in his eyes. "Of course, Joy. What would you like to know?" "Well," Joy continued, leaning back in her chair with that signature smirk that regular viewers knew meant trouble was coming, I have been watching your career for many years, and I have noticed a pattern that I think needs to be addressed. The other panelists exchanged glances, clearly not entirely sure where Joy was heading with this line of questioning. Whoopi raised an eyebrow. Sarah looked uncomfortable, and Sunny sat forward in her chair, her legal instincts telling her that this conversation was about to take a dramatic turn. "What kind of pattern are you referring to?" Keanu asked, his voice calm and measured. Joy shuffled through her notes dramatically, making a show of finding the right page as if she had not already memorized every word she planned to say. "It seems to me that throughout your entire career, you have had this tendency to, shall we say, project an image that isn't entirely genuine. Your music, your social media presence, your public appearances, they all seem to follow a very specific, manufactured narrative. Do you not think it's time to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, you're not quite as original as you would like people to believe?" The question hung in the air like a bomb that had just been dropped. The audience fell silent, sensing that something significant was happening, but not quite sure what to make of it. Keanu's calm demeanor faltered for just a moment before he composed himself. Everyone at the table could see the flicker of confusion and hurt that crossed his face, but not anger. "I'm sorry, Joy, but I'm not sure I understand what you're implying," Keanu replied. His voice was still controlled, but with a vulnerability that had not been there moments before. "I'm just myself. I try to be a good person, and I try to work hard. I don't think I've ever claimed to be anything more or less than that." "Oh, I think you understand exactly what I'm implying," Joy shot back, clearly energized by Keanu's response. "Let's talk about your public image, shall we? How many times have critics pointed out that your kind, humble guy persona seems too perfect to be true? How many people have complained that you use your status to avoid being held accountable for your work?" Whoopi attempted to jump in, sensing that the conversation was spiraling out of control. "Joy, I think maybe we should—" "No, Whoopi," Joy interrupted, holding up her hand without taking her eyes off Keanu. "I think this is a conversation that is long overdue. Keanu has built an empire on the back of his nice guy image, and nobody in this industry seems willing to call him out on it." Keanu's composure was beginning to crack, his hands resting on the arms of his chair as he struggled to maintain his professional demeanor. "Joy, I have worked incredibly hard to be a good person. I've always tried to be honest and authentic. I've never claimed to be perfect." "Have you, though?" Joy pressed, her voice getting louder and more confrontational. "What about the times you've been seen on a public bus or on a subway? Was that a genuine act of kindness, or was it a staged publicity stunt to fuel the narrative? What about the charities you support? Are those heartfelt contributions, or are they just a way to improve your image and avoid scrutiny?" The tension at the table was becoming unbearable. Sarah was fidgeting with her papers, clearly wishing she could disappear. Sunny was watching the exchange with the intense focus of someone who is analyzing every word for potential legal implications. Alyssa looked like she wanted to crawl under the table, and Whoopi was shooting daggers at Joy, clearly furious that her co-host had turned what should have been a pleasant interview into an ambush. "Joy, this is completely inappropriate," Keanu finally said, his voice still calm but with a firmness that surprised everyone. "You invited me here to talk about my new film, not to launch some kind of personal attack based on industry gossip and tabloid speculation." "Personal attack?" Joy laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Keanu, this is called journalism. This is what happens when you spend decades avoiding the hard questions and surrounding yourself with people who are too scared or too invested in your success to tell you the truth." "The truth?" Keanu's voice was rising now, his calm demeanor giving way to a raw sense of hurt. "The truth is that you are sitting here trying to tear down a person who has spent his entire career trying to be good because it makes for good television. The truth is that you have built your entire career on being controversial and divisive, and apparently today I am your target." Joy's eyes lit up with the kind of malicious glee that comes from knowing you have successfully gotten under someone's skin. She leaned forward, clearly relishing the fact that she had managed to crack Keanu's polished exterior. "Oh, so now I am the problem. Not the man who has spent 30 years building a brand on manufactured authenticity, but the person who finally has the courage to point it out. "Joy, that is enough," Whoopi interjected firmly, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had been navigating difficult conversations on television for decades. "This is not what we agreed to discuss today, and you know it." But Joy was not backing down. If anything, Whoopi's attempt to rein her in seemed to fuel her fire even more. "Whoopi, with all due respect, this is exactly the kind of conversation we should be having. When did this show become a place where celebrities can just come and promote their projects without any real scrutiny? When did we stop being journalists and start being cheerleaders?" Keanu was struggling to maintain his composure. The audience could sense the raw emotion emanating from him, and many were shifting uncomfortably in their seats. This was not the entertainment they had expected when they came to see a taping of The View. "Joy, you want to talk about courage?" Keanu said, his voice shaking with barely controlled fury. "It takes courage to be a good person, to risk being misunderstood every time you do something kind. It takes courage to work in an industry that constantly tries to tear people down, especially people who don't fit the mold. What you are doing right now is not courage, it is cowardice. You are hiding behind your position at this table to launch personal attacks that you would never have the guts to make face-to-face in a private conversation." The accusation of cowardice hit Joy like a slap across the face. Her expression hardened, and any pretense of journalistic objectivity vanished completely. "Cowardice? You want to see cowardice, Keanu? Cowardice is building a career on a fake image and then playing the victim when someone calls you out on it. Cowardice is using your celebrity status to avoid accountability for decades." Sarah Haynes, who had been trying to stay out of the increasingly volatile exchange, finally felt compelled to speak up. "Ladies, I think we need to take a step back here. Keanu, you are an incredibly talented actor who has brought joy to millions of people around the world. Joy, I understand you have concerns, but maybe there is a more constructive way to address them." "Sarah, stay out of this," Joy snapped, turning her fury toward her colleague for a moment. "This is bigger than just being nice and polite. This is about integrity in the entertainment industry." "Do not tell Sarah to stay out of anything," Keanu fired back, his protective instincts kicking in as he saw Joy turn on another person at the table. "She is trying to be reasonable, which is more than I can say for you. You want to talk about integrity? Where is your integrity in blindsiding a guest with accusations and conspiracy theories?" Sonny Hostin, who had been watching the exchange with the analytical eye of someone trained in conflict resolution, decided it was time to intervene with some legal perspective. "Joy, I have to point out that what you are doing right now could potentially be considered defamatory. You are making serious accusations about Keanu's character and business practices without presenting any concrete evidence to support your claims." "Defamatory?" Joy laughed bitterly. "Sonny, everything I am saying is based on years of industry reports, interviews with collaborators, and documented instances of questionable practices. This is not defamation. This is long overdue accountability." "Then where's your documentation?" Sonny pressed, her legal training evident in the way she was methodically dismantling Joy's position. "If you have evidence of wrongdoing, present it. If you are making accusations based on rumors and speculation, then you need to acknowledge that." Keanu seized on Sonny's support, feeling like he finally had an ally at the table. "Thank you, Sonny. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Joy has spent the last 10 minutes making wild accusations without providing a single piece of concrete evidence. This is character assassination disguised as journalism." Joy's face was getting redder by the minute, and it was clear that she had not expected this level of pushback from her colleagues. She had likely assumed that once she started the attack, the others would either stay silent or join in. Instead, she was finding herself increasingly isolated at her own table. "You want evidence?" Joy practically shouted, her voice echoing through the studio. "How about the fact that your entire persona is a public relations stunt? How about the charity you started that no one knows anything about? How about the way you've managed to avoid any real controversy by being so aggressively nice that no one dares question you?" The vague nature of Joy's accusations seemed to give Keanu a moment to regain his footing. These were not detailed claims. These were broad generalizations that suggested Joy had no real evidence. Keanu's eyes narrowed as he realized that this ambush had been planned well in advance. "Those are not facts, Joy," Keanu replied, his voice regaining some of the fire it had carried moments before. "Those are just vague rumors, and if you had done your research properly instead of just looking for ammunition to use against me, you would know that my charity work is very public, and I've always been transparent about my intentions." "Publicly transparent?" Joy repeated mockingly. "Of course you're publicly transparent. That's what people do when they want to control the narrative. How much money have you paid over the years to keep people from questioning your authenticity, Keanu?" Alyssa Farah Griffin, who had been silent through most of the confrontation, finally found her voice. "Joy, I think you are crossing a line here. Even if you have concerns about image in the industry, this is not the appropriate forum for this kind of aggressive interrogation. Keanu came here as our guest, and we owe him basic respect and courtesy." "Respect and courtesy?" Joy turned on Alyssa with the same venom she had been directing at Keanu. "Alyssa, you have been in this business long enough to know that respect and courtesy are earned, not automatically granted because someone is famous. Keanu has built his entire brand on a fake persona, and now when someone finally calls him out on it, we're supposed to be polite about it?" Keanu was watching this exchange with growing amazement and disgust. Joy was not just attacking him anymore. She was turning on her own colleagues, revealing a level of hostility and bitterness that went far beyond professional journalism. This was personal for Joy in a way that Keanu was only beginning to understand. "Joy, what is this really about?" Keanu asked, his voice calmer now as he tried to get to the root of the hostility. "Because this feels like it goes way beyond concerns about authenticity. This feels personal. Have I done something to offend you personally? Because if I have, I would rather you just tell me directly instead of hiding behind these professional accusations." For a moment, Joy's mask slipped completely. Her face contorted with a mixture of anger and something that looked almost like pain. "You want to know what this is about, Keanu? This is about watching someone like you get all the credit and all the rewards for being nice. This is about watching you become a hero by repackaging other people's kindness and calling it your own vision. Someone like me?" Keanu's voice was dangerously quiet now. "What exactly does that mean, Joy? What kind of person am I exactly?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and everyone at the table seemed to hold their breath, waiting for Joy's response. Even Joy seemed to realize that she was standing at the edge of a cliff, that her next words would either end this confrontation or push it into territory that none of them would be able to come back from. "You know exactly what I mean," Joy said finally, her voice filled with years of accumulated resentment. "You are everything that is wrong with this industry. You are fake, you are manufactured, and you are completely without shame when it comes to taking credit for other people's kindness. You represent everything I have spent my career fighting against." The words hit Keanu, not like physical blows, but like a deeply personal betrayal. His face went pale, then flushed with renewed anger. He stood up slowly from his chair, his hands trembling with rage as he stared down at Joy with undisguised contempt. "Get up," Keanu said quietly, his voice carrying a menace that made everyone at the table freeze. "Stand up and say that to my face, Joy. If you have the courage to make those accusations, then have the courage to stand up and face me when you make them." Joy remained seated for a moment, clearly weighing her options as Keanu towered over her with barely contained fury. The studio audience was completely silent now, sensing that they were witnessing something unprecedented in daytime television history. Even the camera operators seemed frozen, unsure whether they should keep rolling or cut away from what was clearly becoming a personal confrontation rather than a professional interview. "I said, stand up," Keanu repeated, his voice getting louder and more commanding. "You have spent the last 15 minutes attacking my character, my integrity, and my entire career from the safety of that chair. If you really believe everything you have been saying, then have the decency to stand up and face me while you say it." Joy finally rose from her chair, but slowly and with obvious reluctance. She was a smaller woman than Keanu, and without the protection of the interview table between them, the physical difference was stark. But her expression remained defiant, even as her voice betrayed a slight tremor of uncertainty. "Fine, I am standing," Joy said, trying to maintain her aggressive tone. Does that somehow make your career more legitimate? Does standing up change the fact that you have built your entire brand on manufactured authenticity? You want to talk about manufactured authenticity? Keanu stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried more menace than his earlier shouting. Let me tell you something about authenticity, Joy. Authentic people do not ambush guests on national television with personal attacks disguised as journalism. Authentic people do not spend decades hiding their bitterness and resentment behind a facade of professional curiosity. Whoopi was on her feet now too, moving between the two people with the practiced ease of someone who had mediated countless conflicts over her years in television. Ladies, this needs to stop right now. We are live on television, we have an audience, and this has gone way beyond any reasonable bounds of professional discourse. No, Whoopi, Keanu said, not taking his eyes off Joy. Let her finish what she started. She clearly has more to say about my character, so let her say it. Let America see exactly what kind of person Joy Behar really is when the cameras are rolling and she thinks she has the upper hand. Joy's face was flushed with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. She had clearly not expected Keanu to fight back this aggressively, and she was beginning to realize that she had badly miscalculated the dynamics of this confrontation. But her pride would not let her back down now. Not with millions of people watching and her colleagues staring at her with a mixture of shock and disapproval. You want to know what kind of person I am, Keanu? Joy's voice was shaking now, but whether from anger or fear was impossible to tell. I am the kind of person who refuses to be intimidated by celebrities who think their fame makes them untouchable. I am the kind of person who believes that truth matters more than politeness. Truth? Keanu laughed, but there was no humor in it. You have not spoken a single word of truth since this conversation started. Everything you have said has been based on rumors, speculation, and your own personal issues with successful people. Sarah Haynes was trying desperately to regain control of the situation, her voice high and strained as she attempted to inject some reason into the chaos. Keanu, Joy, please. We can discuss these issues without it becoming personal. We are all professionals here. We can find a way to have this conversation that respects everyone involved. Sarah, there's no conversation to be had here, Keanu replied, still not breaking eye contact with Joy. This woman invited me onto this show under false pretenses so she could launch a personal attack for reasons that have nothing to do with my film or my career. This is not journalism, this is a hit job. Sunny Hostin was watching the exchange with growing concern, her legal background making her acutely aware of how quickly this situation could spiral into something with serious consequences. Joy, I really think you need to consider the legal implications of what you are saying. You are making serious accusations about Keanu's character and business practices without providing any substantive evidence. Legal implications? Joy turned on Sunny with renewed fury. Are you threatening me now? Is that what this has come to? We cannot even have honest conversations about celebrity culture without lawyers getting involved. I'm not threatening anyone, Sunny replied calmly, her legal training evident in her measured response. I am simply pointing out that there are professional and legal standards that govern how we conduct interviews, especially when we are discussing someone's reputation and career. Alyssa was nodding in agreement with Sunny, clearly disturbed by the direction the conversation had taken. Joy, I have to agree with Sunny here. This has stopped being an interview and become something else entirely. Keanu came here to discuss his new film, and instead he has been subjected to what amounts to a character assassination. Joy was now completely isolated at her own table, with every one of her colleagues either actively opposing her or trying to mediate the conflict she had created. But instead of backing down, she seemed to become even more desperate and aggressive, like a cornered animal lashing out at everything around her. So now you are all ganging up on me? Joy's voice was getting higher and more shrill. I am the only one at this table with the courage to ask real questions, and instead of supporting journalism, you are all protecting a celebrity who has built his career on lies and deceit. That is it, Keanu said, his voice cutting through Joy's increasingly frantic accusations. I am done with this. I came here as a professional courtesy to promote my work and connect with fans. And instead, I've been ambushed by someone who clearly has personal issues that have nothing to do with me or my career. Keanu turned away from Joy and began walking toward the edge of the set, his intention to leave clear to everyone in the studio. But Joy was not ready to let him go, not when she felt like she was finally getting the confrontation she had apparently been planning for months or even years. "That is right. Run away," Joy called after him, her voice carrying across the studio. "That is what you always do when someone calls you out on your lies. Run away and let your publicist clean up the mess." Keanu stopped dead in his tracks. For a moment, he stood completely still, his back to the table, his shoulders rigid with barely controlled rage. The entire studio held its breath, sensing that something significant was about to happen. When Keanu turned around, his face was a mask of cold fury that was somehow more frightening than his earlier emotional outbursts. He walked back toward Joy with slow, deliberate steps, and everyone at the table instinctively moved back. "You made a mistake, Joy," Keanu said, his voice deadly quiet. "A very big mistake. You could have asked legitimate questions about my career, my films, my business ventures. You could have been a professional journalist doing her job. Instead, you chose to make this personal. You chose to attack my character, my integrity, and my right to exist in this industry. And now you're going to learn why that was such a stupid decision." Joy tried to maintain her defiant posture, but Keanu could see the fear creeping into her eyes. "Are you threatening me, Keanu? Because if you are, then you are proving everything I said about your character." "I am not threatening you," Keanu replied, moving even closer. "I am promising you. I am promising you that your little ambush today is going to cost you more than you ever imagined. I am promising you that when I walk out of here, you are going to discover just how much power a man like me actually has in this industry." The tension in the studio was so thick, it was almost suffocating. Audience members were shifting nervously in their seats, some beginning to stand as if preparing to leave. Camera operators were looking to their directors for guidance, unsure whether they should continue filming or cut away from what was clearly becoming a personal confrontation that had nothing to do with entertainment. Whoopi made one final attempt to restore order, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had been the moderator of this show for years. "Keanu, Joy, this has to stop right now. We are going to take a commercial break, and when we come back, we are going to find a way to have a professional conversation, or we are going to end this interview." "There is not going to be any interview when you come back," Keanu said, not taking his eyes off Joy. "I am leaving, and I am never coming back to this show as long as she is sitting at this table." Joy seemed to realize that she had pushed things too far, that her moment of vindictive triumph was about to turn into a professional disaster. She made one last desperate attempt to justify her actions. "Keanu, if you would just acknowledge that there might be some validity to the concerns I have raised." "Acknowledge?" Keanu's voice rose to a shout that could be heard throughout the studio. "You want me to acknowledge your lies and personal attacks? You want me to validate your jealousy and bitterness by pretending that your accusations have any basis in reality?" That was the moment when studio security finally decided they needed to intervene. Two large men in dark suits appeared at the edges of the set, clearly ready to step in if the confrontation became physical. Their presence seemed to break the spell that had held everyone frozen, and suddenly there was movement and noise as producers and assistants rushed to manage the crisis. "Get me out of here," Keanu said to one of the security guards, his voice shaking with exhaustion and rage. "Get me away from this woman before I do something I will regret." As Keanu was escorted off the set, Joy made one final desperate attempt to have the last word. "This is exactly what I was talking about," she called after the departing star. "This is how you handle any criticism, any accountability. You run away and hide behind your handlers." But Keanu did not turn around. He walked off the view set with his head held high, leaving behind one of the most explosive confrontations in daytime television history, and ensuring that his relationship with Joy Behar and quite possibly the view itself was permanently destroyed. The cameras kept rolling as the remaining panelists sat in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened and figure out how to salvage what was left of their show. An even more shocking story is coming in the next video. Subscribe so you don't miss it.